She took my keys the same day we buried my son. By Friday, she'd changed the locks like I had never lived there. The house on Whitaker Street had been mine since 1983. Red brick porch, 2 live oaks, the smell of salt air and turpentine. My boy grew up sanding deck rails with me there, built his first business plan at that kitchen table. And now, 3 days after we laid him in the ground, his wife stood on that same porch and said, "You'll get a car to the guest house. Your room is no longer yours." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from. I remember the light that afternoon, hard and white, cutting through Spanish moss. The hearse hadn't even cleared the corner when she shoved my overnight bag into my hands. My key turned in the lock. Dead. Inside, movers in blue shirts were stacking boxes labeled Office, China, and one marked Eli's Toys, my grandson's toys. A $2,860 HVAC receipt sat on the hall table, dated June 14th, signed J. Collins. The signature looked like someone had traced my son's name through glass. I asked, "When did you decide this?" She said, "It's cleaner this way." On the counter beside her phone lay the funeral program. Black border, October 22nd, Savannah, and a fresh storage unit contract time-stamped 9:18 p.m. Sadr 2 nights after the service. She had been packing before the flowers wilted. I texted Mark, my old Navy buddy turned probate attorney. She took the keys after the funeral. He wrote back within minutes. "Don't argue. Collect proof." That night I sat on the curb outside the house, the porch camera still blinking green. My grandson, Eli, slipped out with his iPad. "Grandpa," he whispered, "Mom's moving stuff. She says you're not coming back." He airdropped me screenshots of her messages. One showed a pending $480,000 transfer labeled Investment Group. I told him to go inside and lock his door. When I reached the motel on Abercorn Street, I emptied my pockets. One brass safety deposit box key lay in my palm, the one my son gave me when he created the family trust. "If anything happens," he'd said, "you keep the second key." I realized that was more than sentiment. It was leverage. At midnight, the porch camera sent its final alert. A truck idling at the curb, taillights glowing red. Through the pixel blur, I saw my wife's cedar chest slide across the threshold. Then the feed went dark. I didn't sleep. I listed every missing thing on a napkin. The chest, the blue '69 Chevelle, the framed contracts from the shipyard, my son's watch. Each item was a piece of proof. By dawn, I'd decided I wouldn't pound on doors or shout. I'd use paper, not fists. Tomorrow I'd start with the courthouse and the bank. She thought she'd kicked me out. She'd only pushed me into the records room. The morning after she locked me out, I woke in a motel that smelled of bleach and fried eggs. The air conditioner rattled like a loose engine belt. And for a long time I just stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of how fast grief can turn into paperwork. I'd buried my son on Wednesday, and by Saturday, his widow had already rewritten the story of who belonged in his house. The coffee from the lobby tasted burned, but it gave me something to hold. I spread the receipts and printouts on the bed. The HVAC bill with that fake J, the storage unit contract, the screenshot of the $480,000 transfer. Each piece felt like a bone from a body no one wanted to identify. I took out my phone and scrolled through old messages from my son. The last one I stopped on was from June. "Dad, if anything ever happens, remember, you've got the second key." Attached was a photo of a Seaport brokerage slip. The number at the bottom, 699,842, glowed like an omen. He'd meant for me to guard something, and she had no idea that I still held that key. At 10 a.m., I called Mark, my attorney friend. "She's moved in," I told him. He sighed. Don't fight fire with emotion. We'll use process. Get me proof, trust docs, life estate deed, anything tying your name to the assets. Life estate? I asked. You kept the deed from 2010, right? The rider that lets you live there until death? I hesitated. It's in the deposit box. He said, Good, that's your anchor. Don't touch it yet. After the call, I drove downtown to get some air. Savannah's riverfront smelled like brine and magnolia. The tourists were snapping photos of wrought iron balconies, the same way my son once did when he closed his first real estate sale. I leaned on the railing and said his name out loud. Jacob. The word dissolved into the wind. My phone buzzed. A message from Eli. Mom said we're selling the blue car. That car, his '69 Chevelle, was titled jointly under me until he refinanced it for the restoration. My name was still on the lien. If she tried to sell it, she'd need my signature. Another lever. Small, but solid. I scribbled notes on a napkin from the diner. Chevelle. Joint lien. $1,800 repair invoice, deed rider. Life estate filed 2010. Brokerage key. My copy, HVAC receipt. Fake signature investment transfer. $480,000. The waitress passed by and refilled my coffee. She looked at the papers and said, You look like you're planning something big. I smiled thinly. Just fixing what's mine. Back at the motel, I powered up my laptop. The Wi-Fi was weak, but I opened the county recorder's website. Sure enough, the life estate deed from 2010 was still active. That meant she could not sell or evict without my consent. She had locked me out of my own legal right. And that was a mistake that would cost her dearly. I spent that night drafting an email to Mark. Subject, Evidence Log 1, Life Estate Rider. Recorded 2010, Book 482, page 317. 2. Joint title, Chevelle VN 3799401 2.3. HVAC receipt, $2,860, June 14th, signed J. Collins. Seaport brokerage slip, $690.99, $842 tax hold. $480,000 transfer pending to investment group. At 1:40 a.m., I hit send. The motel room clock glowed 1:17. Outside, rain began to tap on the window like fingers on glass. I looked at the brass deposit box key again, then slid it under my pillow. Somewhere between exhaustion and anger, a calm settled in. Losing my son had been the kind of pain that empties a man out. But what she did, turning that loss into a ledger, filled me back up with purpose. By dawn, I'd made a decision that felt almost military. Monday morning, I'd be at the courthouse at 8:15 sharp. I'd walk in with a folder, not a fury. I whispered to the dark room, You took my home. Now I'll take the ground under your feet. Monday came gray and quiet, the kind of Savannah morning when even the gulls sound tired. I ironed my only clean shirt on the motel desk, folded my papers into a manila folder, and drove downtown to the courthouse. The streets still smelled of rain, but I felt steadier than I had in days. Mark was waiting for me on the courthouse steps, sleeves rolled up, tie loose. We'll file emergency motions today, he said. Freeze everything before she drains it. Inside, the marble floor gleamed under fluorescent lights. He spread a yellow legal pad and began writing the first draft of an emergency petition for temporary restraints. Here's the key, he explained. Your son's trust and company sale required 2 co-trustee signatures, his and yours. She's been pretending yours doesn't exist. I showed him the Seaport brokerage slip and the photo of the HVAC receipt with her forged signature. He took one look and said, This forgery alone could void her credibility. We'll need originals. By noon, I had hired a private investigator named Ruth, an old insurance contact who still owed me a favor. I gave her the storage unit contract and the neighbor's phone number. Find out what was in that midnight truck, I said. She nodded, scribbling dates. At 2 p.m., we met my friend from the bank, Martin, the branch manager who'd known my son since Little League. He looked uneasy. "There's a large pending wire," he said quietly. $480,000 to a syndicate account in Miami. It hasn't cleared yet. "Can you stop it?" I asked. "With a court order," he said, "I can hold it for 72 hours. Mark leaned forward. "We'll have that by tonight." We mapped out the week in ink. Subpoenas on Oct 30. Hearing scheduled for Nov 6. It was a clean plan, built like a scaffolding. Before leaving, I walked alone to Whitaker Street. The live oaks hissed overhead, heavy with moss. Her car wasn't there, but the blinds were half drawn. I took a time-stamped photo of the front door and keypad. She had changed the code, but when I pressed the garage remote, it clicked open. She'd forgotten the old frequency. Inside, the space smelled of paint thinner. The Chevelle was gone. I crouched and traced the tire marks on the concrete, memorizing the last thing my son touched. That night, back at the motel, Ruth called. "You were right." She rented the storage unit at Savannah Lock and Store under initials, J. Collins, and paid with a Visa ending in 44119. The clerk says she moved in Thursday night. 3 boxes and a cedar chest. My hand tightened around the phone. That chest belonged to my wife. Ruth said, "We can't touch it yet, but we can photograph everything." "Want me to?" "Yes," I said. "Document. Don't disturb." At 11:08 p.m., I organized everything in my $12 notebook, drawing 4 columns labeled Money, Locks, Receipts, and Devices. Under Money, I wrote Miami Wire Pending. Under Locks, Front Door Recade Okit 24. Garage Unchanged. Under Receipts, HVAC 2860 Forged. Under Devices, Ring Offline 8:41 p.m. Okit 24. Eli iPad screenshots saved. I pressed record on my phone and called Eli. His voice came through sleepy but clear. "Did Mommy say to sell the blue car?" "Yes," he whispered. "She said Grandpa's too old to drive it anyway." I let him talk another minute, about his dog, about how the house felt too quiet now. Then I saved the voice memo, labeling it Eli 1027. When I hung up, I stared at the brass safety deposit box key lying beside my wallet. It caught the motel lamp's glow like a promise. That key, that piece of metal, meant the trust was still partly mine, and she couldn't touch a cent without my consent. By midnight, I wasn't just mourning anymore. I was building a case. Each receipt, each photo, each text was a brick in a wall she didn't know I was laying. Tomorrow, she'd still believe I was an old man sitting alone in a motel room, but I'd already started turning that room into an office of war. By Tuesday morning, the motel room had become my command post. Every paper was sorted in a neat row on the desk, binder clips in place, pen lines drawn like blue veins across the pages. I wasn't just a father mourning anymore. I was an auditor of my own downfall. Mark met me outside Seaport Brokerage just after 10. The receptionist looked nervous when she saw my attorney badge clipped to his briefcase. "We're here to review transactions from the Collins Family Trust," he said calmly. She paged the branch manager, and within minutes we were seated in a glass office that smelled of lemon cleaner and recycled air. The manager pulled up the accounts on a dual monitor. "Here," he said, tracing lines on the screen. 3 ACH pulls, October 25th, 26th, and 27th, totaling $1.2 million, 2 into Education Holdings, 1 into Operating Reserve. All authorized by Mrs. Collins. "Without co-trustee consent?" Mark asked. "Yes," the manager said. "Our system didn't flag it because both names remain active. I'll issue a hold notice. No outbound over $50,000 until we receive court clarification." I watched him print and staple the forms, each click of the stapler, a nail sealing her plans. Mark nodded toward me. "Paper trail starts here. Don't ever lose these originals. We left the building into a bright Savannah noon, air humid enough to feel like breathing through syrup. I stopped at an office supply store and bought a $12 notebook. Not fancy, just ruled lines and a cardboard cover. That night, I started writing like a man doing inventory on his own soul. 4 columns: money, locks, receipts, devices, under money. Wire to Miami, pending. Under locks. Front door rekeyed Oct 24. Garage frequency unchanged. Under receipts. HVAC $2,160, forged signature. Under devices. Ring offline 8:41 p.m. Eli iPad screenshots saved. At 3 p.m., I met Ruth outside Savannah Lock and Store. Her trench coat was 2 sizes too big, but her smile was steady. "We can't break the lock," she said, "but we can look." The clerk remembered the woman perfectly. Late 20s, white BMW SUV, 2 men helping load in a cedar chest and banker boxes. Ruth took photos from the aisle with a zoom lens. The unit number, A19, gleamed on a steel plate. "She paid for a 3-month lease," Ruth whispered. "Prepaid, cashless, Visa ending 4419. "That's her card," I said. "The same one on the brokerage pulls." "She's sloppy," Ruth said. "Sloppy people get caught." Back at the motel, I examined the forged HVAC receipt again. The J in Jacob's name curled too tight at the bottom, and the stroke order didn't match his handwriting on checks from April. I laid them side by side, placed a quarter for scale, and photographed both. "Visual confirmation," I wrote in my notes, "will hold in probate." That evening, Mark drafted 2 documents, an affidavit template for the neighbor and a spoliation letter warning DIL not to dispose of household property. "We don't accuse," he said. "We anticipate. It's more frightening." At 9, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from her voice sharp but shaky. "You had your time in this house. Don't embarrass yourself with lawyers." I replayed it twice, then saved it to a new folder labeled Evidence Audio. Before sleeping, I placed my wedding band on the nightstand beside my notebook. The lamp threw a dull circle of light across the metal. "You built this home," I said to my reflection in the window. "She just moved in for the inheritance." Outside, thunder rolled over the river. I imagined her pacing in that bright kitchen, thinking she'd won. But each move she made, every forged receipt, every wire, was now documented, dated, and signed into existence. By the time the storm quieted, I had written the closing line for my notes that night. "Revenge isn't rage. It's reconciliation with proof." Tomorrow would bring signatures, subpoenas, and the slow turning of the legal gears. I was no longer a man who'd lost a house. I was the man who owned the paperwork she forgot to read. By Wednesday morning, the calm had teeth. I woke before dawn, ironed the same shirt I'd worn to the funeral, and checked my phone for updates. Ruth had already texted me a photo she'd printed from DIL's Instagram. A smiling kitchen selfie. Granite counters shining. Caption, "Fresh start." In the reflection of the oven door, you could clearly see the curved top of my wife's cedar chest. Proof hiding in plain sight. Ruth circled it in red ink and wrote, "Timestamp verified. 07:18 a.m. OCT 29. At 9 a.m., the bank manager, Martin, called. "She just tried to wire $2.4 million to the same Miami syndicate account," he said. Blocked immediately per the hold notice. His voice lowered. "She's furious. Called me every name in the book." "Let her," I said. "The louder she gets, the more paper we'll have." He emailed the internal memo documenting her outburst, complete with the line, "Client insisted she is sole heir." That single phrase was gold. Arrogance on record. By noon, Mark and I met in his office. He printed the memo, the Instagram photo, and the neighbor's affidavit Ruth had secured the night before. It described the truck idling at 12:22 a.m. on the night of the funeral, furniture being loaded. Mark smiled faintly. This is what wins hearings. Details that smell real. That afternoon, I drove past the Whitaker house. The porch railing was freshly painted, and a contractor van sat in the drive. My stomach tightened. Renovating before probate? That wasn't just premature, it was destruction of evidence. I parked across the street, snapped 3 photos with a $5 disposable camera, making sure to capture the date stamp in the corner. At 5 p.m., my phone buzzed with a voicemail from her. You're cruel, making me ask for money. I can't even pay the contractors. I replayed it twice, then forwarded it to Mark. Perfect, he said. It shows she's still spending from the estate. That night, in my notebook, under money, I added, attempted 2.4 wire, blocked 1029, bank memo logged. Under locks, I wrote, contractor access, possible evidence removal. On Thursday, Mark filed an amended petition, this one adding waste and mismanagement of estate assets. He attached every piece of proof we had, the HVC forgery, Instagram reflection, neighbor's affidavit, bank memo, and title record of the blue Chevelle showing my lien for $18,400 by Friday morning. Seaport Brokerage issued an official freeze letter. No funds could move until court review. We had cut her financial oxygen. At noon, my phone vibrated again, an unknown number. It was her. If you don't sign the releases, I'll tell the court you're senile. I exhaled slowly. Then you'll need proof, I said, and hung up. Every threat, every lie, every insult was a nail in her own coffin. That evening, Ruth met me for coffee on Broughton Street. She's scared, she said, sliding over a photo of DIL outside the storage facility, talking into her phone, pacing. She knows something's slipping, I nodded. Fear means we're close. Back at the motel, I laid out everything like a general reviewing battle plans. 12 pages of bank printouts, 7 affidavits, and a dozen photos. My $12 notebook now had smudged corners and a coffee ring across the cover. Inside, it was clean law. Dates, times, evidence, no emotion. Mark called one last time that night. Hearing confirmed for Thursday, November 6th. Bring your notebook and your patience. What about her attorney? I asked. She hired one today, he said. A loud one. Good sign. Means she's desperate. I hung up, took off my glasses, and looked at the brass key lying on the table. For 2 weeks, it had been a reminder of loss. Tonight, it looked like a sword. I wrote one final note before turning off the light. Revenge is best when it's mistaken for paperwork. The next step wasn't anger. It was the courtroom, and she had no idea the floor she was standing on was already mine. Thursday, November 6th. The sky over Savannah looked scrubbed clean, the kind of hard blue you only see after rain. I polished my shoes until I could see my face in them. Creases, silver hair, eyes that hadn't slept. At 8:30 sharp, I walked into Chatham County Probate Court with Mark beside me and my worn $12 notebook clutched like scripture. The courtroom smelled of dust and peppermint oil. 2 rows ahead sat my daughter-in-law in a white suit, pearl earrings flashing under the fluorescence. She didn't look at me. She stared straight at the bench as if confidence could be faked by posture. Her lawyer, a young man with slicked-back hair and too much cologne, whispered something and slid a folder across the table. Mark leaned toward me. Stay silent unless asked. Calm wins cases. I nodded, my palms open on the table. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses low on her nose, called the case. Collins Family Trust, emergency hearing regarding fiduciary control and asset preservation. Her voice filled the chamber like a metronome. Mark stood. Your Honor, my client was removed from his home 3 days after his son's funeral. He holds legal co-trustee status and a recorded life estate right in the Whitaker property. The opposing party has initiated unauthorized transfers totaling $3.6 million and moved trust assets without notice. He placed 3 folders on the bench. Exhibit A, the operating agreement, requires dual signatures. Exhibit B, the brokerage hold letter issued after irregular withdrawals. Exhibit C, the 2010 deed rider granting my client permanent residence rights. The judge flipped through each page, the paper whispering louder than the murmurs behind us. Counsel for respondent? Her lawyer rose, smiling too wide. Your Honor, grief can cause confusion. My client acted in good faith, believing the estate was hers by survivorship. Do you have proof of sole ownership? The judge asked. He hesitated. Not precisely, but she was the surviving spouse. Mark gestured to me. May the witness speak? The judge nodded. I stood slowly. Your Honor, my son made me co-trustee because he trusted me to protect what he built. He told me, Dad, you're the ballast. The trust document is dated June 3rd, signed by both of us, notarized. It requires 2 signatures for any major transfer. She knew that. Across the aisle, DIL's knuckles whitened on her purse strap. Mark continued. We also have evidence of forgery on an HVAC invoice used to justify a property expense. Expert review pending. He slid the June 14th receipt forward. Signature comparison enclosed. Her lawyer objected. Speculation. Then let's move to facts, Mark said. On October 25th through 27th, Mrs. Collins executed 3 unauthorized ACH transfers totaling $1.2 million. On October 29th, she attempted a $2.4 million wire to a Miami syndicate, blocked by the bank. The bank manager, Martin, stepped up next, jacket crisp, voice steady. Our records confirm those transfers. When the hold was placed, Mrs. Collins arrived in person and declared herself sole heir. We logged the interaction. Mark nodded. The court will note that arrogance is self-documenting. The gallery chuckled. The judge rapped her pen once for silence. Ruth followed, testifying about the midnight truck. She handed over photos. Headlights bleeding across Whitaker's porch. Movers carrying boxes. One marked office. Then she laid down the printed Instagram photo, the reflection of the cedar chest in the oven glass. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge peered at it for a long moment. Mrs. Collins, is this your kitchen? DIL's voice cracked. Yes, ma'am. And that chest? Family furniture, she whispered. Belonging to? Her silence answered. Mark gave the final cue. We also have an audio clip recorded October 24th. I pressed play on my phone. My daughter-in-law's voice echoed through the courtroom. You're out tonight. My house. My rules. The judge looked over her glasses. Whose house? Her attorney stammered. It's complicated. Not anymore, the judge said. She signed the temporary order right there. All transfers are frozen. Respondent is to restore Mr. Collins's access to the Whitaker property by 5 p.m. tomorrow for retrieval of personal effects. Inventory due within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in contempt. For the first time in 2 weeks, the air tasted clean. Outside the courthouse, the press of humidity felt lighter. Mark buttoned his jacket. We've only stopped the bleeding, he said. Next, we prove the forgery, and then we go for full control. Ruth joined us on the steps, flipping her notepad. By the way, the Miami account traces to a real estate shell, her old partner from before your son met her. Might explain the urgency. I stared across the street at the cathedral spire cutting the sky. She thought she could erase history with a wire transfer, I said quietly. But paper remembers, Mark smiled. And now, the paper's on our side. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A new voicemail, area code 305. I played it on speaker. A smooth, male voice. "Mr. Collins, this is Raphael from Seaside Holdings, Miami. We need to discuss your investment authorization." Mark grinned. "Perfect trail. They think you're involved. We'll subpoena their records." As the three of us walked toward the parking lot, the courthouse clock struck noon. Bells echoed over the river, each one sounding like a countdown to something she could no longer control. I drove back to the motel with my notebook on the passenger seat and the court order clipped inside. Every corner I turned felt heavier with justice. In the motel mirror that evening, I caught my reflection and whispered, "Jacob, your old man kept the line steady." Then I opened the notebook to a blank page and wrote the next heading in neat block letters. Act 2 of the war. Enforcement. The battle had shifted. She'd walked into court expecting an old widower. She left facing a co-trustee armed with receipts, signatures, and silence sharper than any lawyer's tongue. Friday, 4:55 p.m. I stood at the wrought iron gate of Whitaker Street with a folded court order in my jacket pocket. The humidity had turned the paper soft at the edges, but the ink, black, decisive, was still bold. 5 o'clock sharp, the order said. I checked my watch. 2 minutes to go. A white SUV pulled up, and she stepped out, sunglasses covering half her face. Her posture was all steel until she saw Ruth standing beside me, notepad ready, phone camera blinking red. Then the confidence slipped. "You're early," she said flatly. "Court said 5, I replied. "I'm late by 2 minutes." She fished for her keys, hesitated, and finally unlocked the door. The click of that deadbolt was sweeter than any apology. Inside, the house looked sterile, like a show home instead of a life. My son's photographs were gone, the scent of lemon polish covering what used to smell like cedar and sea air. "I've made an inventory," she said, handing over 3 typed pages. The list was impressive. China sets, linens, old tools, but 2 things were missing: the cedar chest and the banker's boxes. "Where's the rest?" I asked. She crossed her arms. "That's everything I have." Ruth stepped forward, flipping open her phone. Time-stamped evidence shows otherwise. Storage Unit A19, Savannah Lock and Store. DIL's jaw twitched. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then you won't mind if we check?" Ruth smiled. I walked down the hallway toward the guest room. The rug corner was flipped, the floor showing faint square indentations, exact dimensions of the cedar chest. "You moved it," I said. "That rug was always like that," she snapped. Ruth crouched, took a photo with a tape measure laid across the floor. 16 inches deep, same as chest dimensions, she said softly. Dial turned red. "You can't take pictures in my house." "Correction," I said, holding up the order. "Our house." Her glare could have stripped paint, but she didn't speak. I opened the study desk, empty drawers except one. Inside, tucked beneath blank printer paper, was a storage unit brochure and a small key tag stamped Lock and Store. When I pulled it out, she lunged for it. Ruth's hand came down first, noting the time allowed. "Observed 6:12 p.m., Ruth said, clicking her pen. "Photographed." I slipped the tag into an envelope and sealed it. "We'll return this to the judge." "You're humiliating yourself," she said quietly. "You'll die in this house alone." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll die owning it." We left without another word. Outside, the wind smelled like marsh salt and iron. Ruth drove off to file the new affidavit. I walked back toward the motel, each step lighter than the last. That night, my grandson texted, "Mom's crying, says you ruined everything." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "No, buddy, I fixed what was broken." At 9:30 p.m., Martin from the bank called again. She just tried another withdrawal, $700,000, labeled construction retainer, blocked automatically. "Good," I said. Keep the file, he chuckled. She's making my job easy. By Monday, the judge had scheduled a show cause hearing to address contempt. DIL's lawyer reached out first thing Tuesday. Can we settle privately? Mark answered for me. Produce the chest and full inventory. Then we talk. For the first time, she had no leverage left. No money flow, no sympathy, no story to hide behind. That evening, I sat in the motel with my notebook open and the wedding band beside it. The brass key lay next to the ring, gleaming under the yellow lamp. I wrote the day's summary like a diary entry, Nov 7, 2025. Possession regained. Assets frozen. Truth closing in. When the ink dried, I leaned back and whispered into the quiet. Almost home, Ellen. The AC hummed softly, as if answering. The next morning, Mark met me with a new motion. Contempt and enforcement. He smiled as he read the top line aloud. Court will not tolerate disobedience of orders. She won't hand it over, I said. She will, he replied. Contempt hearings terrify people with something to lose. That Friday, a new update came from Ruth. She'd seen movers unloading boxes from a lock-and-store truck at the Whitaker curb. Unit A19 is empty, she said. Where's the chest? On its way home, apparently. I closed my notebook, exhaled, and looked out the motel window. The sun was setting in streaks of gold over the Savannah marsh. For 2 weeks, my world had been a war zone of silence and paperwork. Now the tide was shifting. By the time darkness fell, I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore, just restoration. The house, the chest, my son's legacy, they were all returning, one document at a time. I slipped my wedding band back onto my finger for the first time since the funeral. It felt cold, but right. Almost home, I murmured again. Wednesday, November 12th. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and lemon oil when I walked in. My daughter-in-law sat 2 benches ahead of me, her posture smaller now, her lawyer whispering furiously. Mark leaned close. This is it, he said. We closed the loop today. The bailiff called the case. Same judge, same wooden gavel, but the tension felt different. Less a battle, more an audit. Mark stood first. Your Honor, the respondent failed to produce full inventory, ignored a lawful order, and continued attempting unauthorized transfers. He opened a folder thick enough to look like a novel. We will show forgery, concealment, and contempt. The forgery expert took the stand, a gray-haired man with half-moon glasses. He projected 2 documents on the courtroom screen. The June 14th HVC receipt, signed J. Collins, and one of Jacob's authentic checks from April. The pen lifts here, he said, tapping the fake. Different stroke order, inconsistent pressure, reversed loop on the J. Whoever wrote this was imitating. The judge's expression didn't change, but she stopped tapping her pen. Next came the neighbor, affidavit in hand. I saw a moving truck around midnight, October 24th, she said. Furniture, boxes, cedar chest? Then Ruth stepped up with her photos. The oven reflection, the storage lease, the key tag, the Instagram timestamp. Each click of her slides sounded like a hammer. Finally, Martin from the bank testified again. Attempted withdrawal of $700,000, labeled construction retainer, denied November 7th. Mark ended simply. Your Honor, grief explains sorrow. It does not explain forgery, concealment, or theft. The judge nodded slowly. Grief does not transfer title, she said, echoing his words. Mr. Collins, you remain co-trustee with full authority. Mrs. Collins, all transfers are hereby ceased. You will deliver a complete inventory and the cedar chest by Friday noon. She signed the paper with a stroke that sounded like thunder. The court appoints a special fiduciary to oversee all future actions. When she finished, I heard my breath for the first time in days. DIL sat motionless. Her lawyer whispered, "We can appeal." She didn't answer. Outside the courthouse, the air smelled like rain. Eli waited near the steps with Ruth. He ran to me before anyone could stop him. "Grandpa, are we going home?" I crouched, holding him tight. "We're going where the truth lives," I said. That afternoon, a lock-and-store truck pulled up to Whitaker Street. The driver handed me a clipboard. "Delivery from Unit A19, signed release." I recognized her handwriting, shaky, uneven. He rolled the cedar chest down the ramp, the same one Ellen and I bought our first year married. The packing slip read, "Unit emptied 11:40 a.m. All contents returned." I tipped the driver $20 and watched as he drove away. When I opened the lid, cedar scent filled the house, sharp and clean. Beneath the folded quilts were 2 banker's boxes labeled Operating 2019. Inside the first, between company ledgers and tax forms, lay a thin folder stamped Trust Amendment. Mark arrived within the hour. He read the first page and whistled. "Here it is," he said. "Your son's final clause, in case of deadlock, the father's vote prevails. That makes you the ultimate decision-maker." I ran a finger along Jacob's signature. "He called me ballast," I said quietly. Guess he meant it. For the first time since the funeral, I exhaled without shaking. Justice hadn't come in a burst. It came in the slow, disciplined turn of paper to paper, truth to proof. That night, I brewed tea in the empty kitchen. The lights reflected off the oven glass where the cedar chest had once appeared in that photo, and I saw my own tired face there now. Older, but still standing. The war was over. The records were sealed. The house smelled like home again. Thursday, November 13th. The house was quiet again. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, just healed. Morning light came through the same lace curtains Ellen had sewn 30 years ago. Dust floated in slow, forgiving spirals. For the first time since Jacob's funeral, I brewed coffee in my own kitchen and didn't feel like an intruder. The cedar chest sat by the window, sunlight glinting off its brass latch. I ran my hand along the wood grain. Every scratch, every dent told a story. Moving days, birthdays, the night Jacob carved his initials at age 10. I'd thought I'd lost all of it. Turns out, I just had to fight for it. At 10 a.m., Mark arrived with the fiduciary's report. He looked almost cheerful for a lawyer. "Everything's official now," he said. "The accounts are frozen under joint control. Transfers only with your consent. She's agreed to a supervised stipend. You've won, John." "Winning," I said, "feels quieter than I expected." He smiled. Justice usually does. After he left, I opened my $12 notebook, the one that had followed me through every sleepless night. Its pages were soft and crowded, corners bent like old bills. I turned to the last blank sheet and wrote today's date, November 13th, 2025. Then I started cataloging what I'd recovered. $55 million estate preserved. Trust authority reaffirmed. Home restored. Grandson safe. Truth recorded. Each line felt like setting a bone back in place. Around noon, the neighbor, Mrs. Hollis, knocked with a pecan pie wrapped in foil. "Saw the moving truck leave yesterday," she said softly. "He'd be proud of you," I nodded, throat tight. "He taught me the rules," I said. "Measure twice, act once." After she left, I brewed another cup of coffee and sat at the counter where Jacob used to do his taxes. The oven's reflective door caught my outline. Same man, different weight. I wasn't carrying rage anymore. Just a kind of clarity. My phone buzzed. A message from her. "I'm sorry." 2 words. No excuses, no punctuation. For a long moment, I stared at them, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I pressed the side button and let the phone go dark. Some replies don't need words. I called the Miami Syndicate office instead. A polite voice answered, Seaside Holdings. This is John Collins, I said evenly. You attempted to process an investment authorization from a co-trustee of the Collins Family Trust. That authorization was fraudulent. There was a pause, then the voice grew serious. We've received your court order, Mr. Collins. All accounts under review. No funds released. When I hung up, I poured the rest of my coffee into the sink and watched the dark swirl vanish down the drain. That's what closure looks like. Movement, not noise. At dusk, Ruth stopped by with a folder of final photos. Storage unit emptied, locks changed back, everything logged. All quiet on every front, she said. Quiet's good, I replied. Quiet means I can hear my wife's voice again. She smiled and left me at the gate. Inside, I placed my wedding band on top of the cedar chest and whispered, "Home." The evening breeze carried the smell of river salt through the window. Somewhere down the street, a wind chime struck a note that sounded almost like peace. Before bed, I opened my notebook one last time and wrote, "Justice isn't loud. It's the sound a lock makes when it finally opens the right way." Tomorrow, the fiduciary would meet me at the bank to settle the final sign-offs. Tonight, I just sat at the counter with the lights low, the chest beside me, and the quiet breathing of a house that finally felt alive again. Friday, November 14th. The courthouse may have closed the case, but the cleanup still mattered. At 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into Seaport Brokerage again. Same marble floors, same faint lemon scent, but this time, the meeting room felt lighter. Across the polished table sat the special fiduciary, a gray-suited woman with a calm voice and eyes that missed nothing. To her left, my daughter-in-law, silent, hands folded too tightly. Mark spoke first. We're here to sign the structured disbursement plan for the Collins Family Trust. The fiduciary nodded. Monthly household allowance for Mrs. Collins under supervision. Education fund preserved. Capital disbursements only with dual approval. She looked at me. Mr. Collins, do you accept? I do, I said. And you, Mrs. Collins? She hesitated, eyes flicking to the floor. Yes, pens moved, papers shuffled. The sound was soft but final, like sand settling after a storm. When we finished, the fiduciary slid 2 embossed copies toward us. Balance restored, she said simply. Outside in the parking lot, she stopped me. Wait! Her voice cracked a little. I panicked, John. Everything happened so fast after Jacob died. I thought, if I didn't take control, I'd lose everything. I studied her face for a long moment. You didn't lose everything, I said quietly. You just lost the part that wasn't yours. Tears welled in her eyes. I want to fix things. For Eli. Then start with honesty, I said. The rest will follow. We parted without another word. That afternoon, I returned to Whitaker Street to meet the locksmith. I changed the garage keypad code myself, noting the new digits in my notebook. House secure, I wrote. Simple words. Enormous meaning. Eli bounded out of the car, backpack slung over one shoulder. Grandpa, are you staying now? Looks that way, I smiled. But you'll still visit your mom. He nodded solemnly. She said you're helping with the budget. Something like that, I said, chuckling. We walked the garden paths behind the house, where Ellen used to grow roses. The November air carried the faint sweetness of the last blooms. Mom said you used to fix everything, he said. Still do, I replied. Just takes more paper now than tools. Later, we drove downtown for ice cream. Mint for him, butter pecan for me. We sat on the curb, plastic spoons in hand, watching people cross the street under the glow of streetlights. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about court filings or forged receipts. Just the small sound of Eli's slurping melted ice cream and laughing. He looked up suddenly. Grandpa, do you hate Mom? I shook my head. No, kiddo. I hate lies, but I love family. And that includes her. He smiled, spoon between his teeth. You're nicer than her. Don't tell her that, I said. It'll ruin my reputation. He laughed until his ice cream spilled, and I handed him a napkin. When I drove him back home, he hugged me tighter than usual. See you tomorrow? Every day you want, buddy. After he left, I sat in the car a while longer, listening to the faint echo of the court clock in the distance. That night, I placed the court order, the bank letters, and my notebook inside the cedar chest. Then I locked it and set my wedding band on top. The war was finished. The numbers balanced. In the silence that followed, I realized revenge had quietly turned into repair. What began as survival ended as stewardship. My son's legacy was safe, and so was his boy. I turned off the lamp, looked once more at the hallway where my wife's shadow used to pass, and whispered, We're home, Ellen. All debts settled. Sunday, November 16th. The morning sun came through the tall windows like liquid gold. Savannah was quiet. The streets washed clean after a light night rain. I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the soft hum of traffic from the next block. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like it had exhaled. A white envelope lay at my doorstep. No return address, just my name in handwriting I recognized. Hers. I turned it over slowly. Inside was a short note written in careful, uncertain strokes. I understand now what Jacob saw in you. Patience. I let fear turn into greed. I'll sign whatever's needed to make things right. Please take care of Eli. No apology. Not really. But for someone like her, it was the closest thing to confession. I folded it neatly and placed it in the cedar chest beside my notebook. Later that afternoon, I drove Eli to the park. The sky was clear, and the Spanish moss swayed gently above us. He ran ahead with his model airplane, one his father had built. And when it caught the wind, I felt something inside me loosen. He came back, breathless. Grandpa, it flew higher today. Because you threw it straight, I said. Not hard, he grinned, repeating it like a lesson. Straight, not hard. That one line stayed with me. It was how I'd fought this entire battle. Not with rage, but with direction. On the drive home, the radio played an old song Ellen used to hum while cooking. I didn't turn it off this time. I just let it play. That evening, I sat at the same kitchen table where Jacob once signed his business papers. The lamp's glow caught the rim of my coffee cup and the edges of the documents Mark had finalized. A clean ledger, trust intact, every page stamped, closed. I called Mark to thank him. He laughed. You're a rare client, John. Most people come to me wanting revenge. You wanted balance. Revenge and balance, I said, aren't opposites. One just knows when to stop. After hanging up, I walked to the cedar chest one last time. Inside, the brass key, the notebook, the deed copies, all lined up like relics of a private war. I closed the lid and locked it. Then I took out one last slip of paper I'd kept tucked in the back of my wallet. A note my son wrote years ago on a sticky pad. Dad, if anything happens, you know where the ballast belongs. I smiled and whispered, right where you left it. Before bed, I stood at the window. The streetlight outside flickered against the live oaks, the same way it had the night she locked me out. Back then, that light had felt cold, mocking. Tonight, it just looked steady. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It settles. I thought of how she'd taken $55 million, thinking it would buy her peace. But money has a strange gravity. It always pulls truth back to the surface. I raised my coffee mug in a quiet toast to the air, to my wife, my son, and the house that refused to forget who it belonged to. You didn't lose me, I said softly. You gave me away. And with that, I turned off the lamp, leaving the house bathed in moonlight, every wall a witness to the quiet kind of revenge, the kind that doesn't destroy, it restores.